Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. One of the questions that a lot of people have coming into recovery, or even if they're just curious about being sober, is whether or not they're actually an addict. There's a lot of different thoughts about figuring out whether you're an addict or not. A lot of people rely on external indicators like whether they've been arrested, whether they've been fired from a job, or have been cited for poor performance that can be linked to their drug or alcohol use. Whether a family member is upset with them about it, or whether they've had any kind of fallout with friends as a result of it. They rarely look inside to determine whether or not there's things that in their own values they're compromising in order to use drugs and alcohol. I know for me personally, I would often list out the things that had not happened to me. I hadn't gotten a DUI. Hadn't gotten cited for public intoxication. I hadn't been fired. In fact, quite the opposite. I'd been promoted multiple times during my severe alcohol and drug use. I had not had any significant trouble with my spouse or my child. There were all these things that had not happened that I could look at and say, see, that's evidence that I don't have a problem. But that is not the best way to look at things. And so, there's in the book Fuck Feelings by Dr. Michael I. Bennett and Sarah Bennett, they talk about a couple of different aspects of realizing that you have a problem that needs to be addressed. Now, one of the things they discuss is the idea of the intervention. And a lot of people might be familiar with the intervention. Maybe you even participated in one, but the TV show Intervention made this very popular idea. In my opinion, non-scientific opinion, interventions are terrible, terrible things, and they rarely lead to the long-term change and the long-term effects and impacts that they're meant to. And the authors sum it up like this in the book. They say, some people believe that conquering addiction starts with your becoming aware of the anger and pain your addiction causes loved ones. And if you've been unaware, of course, this knowledge helps. Often, however, an intervention doesn't teach anyone anything new. And the best way to get rid of the guilt your addiction causes others is to get even more fucked up. Then you find yourself getting sober for others instead of for yourself, which allows you to hold them responsible for keeping you sober and justifies getting high again when they disappoint you. How often in my addiction, how often I used other people as reasons for getting high, getting drunk. So and so did something that really pissed me off. I'm going to get drunk. My boss said XYZ. That's a reason to get drunk tonight. We use other people as reasons to continue our drug and alcohol abuse. And so we have to get sober for reasons other than other people. We have to get sober for ourselves. And the authors go on to talk about that a little bit too. They say, before even attempting to decide whether you're addicted to a substance or destructive behavior, define for yourself what those things mean. Define for yourself what those things mean. You know what your family says and what AA pamphlets say and even what your dealer says. But unless you take time to define addiction for yourself, everyone else's opinion is bullshit, especially your dealers. A note on that, guys. If your dealer is kind of amazed at the amount of stuff you're buying, it's probably a good sign you got some kind of problem. So, not from personal experience or anything. The authors go on to say, in fact, most people who struggle with addiction don't necessarily have medical withdrawal symptoms. I did not. When I stopped drinking alcohol, I didn't have any medical withdrawal symptoms, and it shocked me. I was shocked. I was floored that I didn't have any shakes, any physical kind of, because I was drinking a lot at that time. I still to this day am very surprised I did not have any kind of physical withdrawal symptoms. So you can't use those as a sign that, oh, I'm okay just because I don't wake up with the shakes in the morning. No, that's not something you can use. So, in fact, most people who struggle with addiction don't necessarily have medical withdrawal symptoms, although if you do, that's significant, or get arrested, or become the subject of an intervention. So, aside from the major signs of addiction, your definition should include all the ways a behavior or substance prevents you from doing your job, being a decent person, and avoiding unnecessary risks. So, here's another thing that's important. I expected that if my drug or alcohol use was impacting aspects of my friendships, my relationship with my spouse, my job, that other people would tell me that. And that would be my sign that I needed to do something. That's not the case. When I told people that I was going to stop drinking, when I first stopped drinking, a lot of people who had never mentioned my drinking to me before, a lot of the people that I talked to about it said, yeah, that was good. I was kind of worried you might have a problem. And in the back of my head, I wondered, why didn't you say something? Because I always assumed that if someone thought I had a problem, they would come and tell me about it. Now, looking back, I think that's kind of a silly assumption to have. And knowing what I know about getting sober, I shouldn't have expected that. But that's what I thought. And so if you're watching this video and thinking, well, nobody's come to me and told me they think I have a problem, so I'm probably okay. Eh, keep listening. So the authors go on to say, what you want to examine then, even by asking friends and family when necessary, is the impact of your possible addiction, the impact that your possible addiction has on just those factors: quality of work, security of employment, your own definition of being a good friend or partner, and your physical health, safe driving, safe sex, safe liver, etc. So, knowing whether or not you have a problem with these things is not going to come from an intervention or from someone coming and telling you that they think you have a problem, or from getting in trouble with the law or your work, or hopefully not from some medical crisis. Those aren't the things that you want to wait for to figure out whether or not you've actually got a problem. What you need to do is to set your own standards, to look at what you feel like are the important things in life. So one of the things that the authors say a little bit later is, this is about whether your behavior compromises your ability to live up to your standards. And if you are wondering whether you have an alcohol or drug problem, and you hear that, and you also think, well, what are my standards? That's a good sign you might have a drug or alcohol problem. Because when I was in the midst of my heavy drug and alcohol use, my standards for how I thought I should be living were very undefined and very circumstantial, situational, and very dependent on what I felt like doing at any given moment. If you're in that situation, that's a good sign that drugs and alcohol might be playing a far disproportionate role in your life than they should be. And that is a good sign that you might have a problem with alcohol and with substance use disorder, or addiction or alcoholism, whatever you want to call it. So all of these things need to be considered, and the most important, the bottom line is that you can't judge whether or not you actually have a problem based on other people and other things and situations. You have to look inward to figure out whether or not the way that you're living matches up with the way you think you should be living. And you have to do an honest appraisal of that. And if those two things aren't matching up, that's a sign that there's a problem and that you're probably going to need some help to deal with that problem. Fortunately, there's a lot of solutions out there. There's a lot of solutions out there. There's a lot to explore, and I'll talk more about that in tomorrow's video. In the meantime, have a great day, and I'll be back here tomorrow with more.